Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counterclipping show number 195 for October 21st, 2024, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. Our topic tonight is the best of GMT Part 3. We're going to cover 2000 to 2003. This is going to get increasingly more difficult, I think, because the output of GMT is such that I'm really going to have to fight pretty hard to get all of the entries I have penciled in for tonight talked about. So we're going to have to fly through that stuff. Before we get started, however, I'll remind everybody, please do like the video on whatever platform you're on. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. And there's a bunch of ways to help support the channel in the video description. Big shout outs to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, as well as the sponsor of the show, our friends at Noble Knight Games, with whom I'll have some video coming at some point as soon as I can get anything edited. So that is coming. The editing has proved to be a bit hairy. We are hopefully finishing up Thunder on the Mississippi tonight, and we are drinking Lagavulin 16, which I was fortunate enough to score for a considerably lower price than it is available for in Ohio, up in Wisconsin, when we were visiting Noble Knight. So there's that. So I want to thank everybody for once again coming out tonight. Super chats and super stickers are on. It's a good way to get your comment highlighted, as well as to support the show. I will definitely respond to any super chat or super sticker comment. So just checking out the chat so far. We got 125 here already so far, which is amazing. All right. So before we go any further, let's say hello to Achilles, Bill Simone, Board Gaming Geezer, Brent McCabe, Chad Canady, Alistair Logie is here, Chet Bell, Christoph DeClerc, Craig Alexander, Daniel Silverthorne, Danny Seckery, Dave Poirier. I don't know why I keep having trouble with that. It's not that complicated. David Imperato, David Zell, Doug Blayard, Eric Goebel, Groucho Marx, HUN644 New, the legend himself, Fucko, is here. Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Faust from sunny Northeast Ohio, and it is in fact sunny here in Northeast Ohio. Well, it was, not anymore. Now it's dark. Joe Okabayashi, Joe Mentum, John Mogg, John C. from the sunny Philippines, Jonathan Dyer, Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp, Kilroy is here. Cal Harris, Lee Grant, Manders, Mark McNair, Meandering Mike, Michael Karlowski, Neil Badke, Palmer, Eldridge, Panzer Division, Lair, Patrick Pictures, Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, Paul Dangle, Perfidious Albion, Paris Baropoulos, Rob Johnson, Ryan Heward, Scott Bell, SG, Sofa Kings, Stacking Limit, Tailwind, Tim Zales, Vicky, welcome back to the show, William Bird, and I apologize, AD. So I apologize to anybody that I have missed. So David Imperato, we will not be discussing this one tonight, but as far as I can tell, I think there's like a co-op mode added in the GMT version, and other than that, it's pretty much the same game with much nicer production values than Victory Games was capable of achieving in the 80s. And Winterson, I have seen some video on the Bamboo Lab 3D printers. They are aiming to sort of applianceify 3D printing, meaning that you kind of bring it home. I'm not sure it's quite this simple, but I think the notion is that unlike the 3D printer I have, which is you bring it home, build it, fuck with it for 2 weeks, and then maybe you can print something successfully, and then maybe it'll keep printing and maybe it won't. The Bamboo Labs printers, which are considerably more expensive, are pretty much designed that you bring it home, take it out of the box, plug it in, stick filament in it, and start printing. That is the idea. So I am fairly impressed with what I have seen so far, and the maximum print speed, which is the big bottleneck for 3D printing, is noticeably faster than my Ender 3 is capable of achieving. So it is the next... That new generation of 3D printers represents a significant advance in terms of home utility over really previous 3D printers. So this is maybe 9, but yeah, pretty much. And the Last Gamble is indeed a big box. Marty, they're getting there. I'm not sure they're quite there yet, but they're getting there. Like I said, the Bamboo's not the only manufacturer doing sort of these next gen 3D printers, and yeah, I was kind of hoping Royce to see the GMT newsletter this week too, but it's not out, so oh well. But Bamboo and a couple other manufacturers who are kind of spearheading this new wave of 3D printers are I think pushing it as close as we've seen so far to kind of making it sort of a reliable home technology that somebody other than like severe hobbyists would want to buy and use. That said, the price is, it's like $1,500 for the Bamboo Labs printer I was looking at. So I also do actually expect a new GMT update this week. And as Marty mentions, they did just finish another convention. So there's that. I was going to show off the link to the Kickstarter again this week in gaming news. I was going to mention again that there's a new edition of One Page Bulge from Steve Jackson Games and Dana Lombardi on Kickstarter right now. It's a deluxeified edition. And I was going to flash that link again, but I'll do you one better. We're going to have Dana on the show tomorrow with Dan. So tune in for that. So, man, I could think of all kinds of uses for the damn things. You can also make small plastic parts to repair things. Those kind of files tend to be available. So there's a lot of uses for them. So in any case, stacking limit. If I had $5 to bet on this, I would bet that this is basically exactly how it is in fact going to go down. So because GMT hates brand, and we are talking GMT tonight. And next week, by the way, I will announce next week's topic in advance. Will be the Compass Games flyer / newsletter / holiday sale, which holiday sale, but it started in like the early October and it runs through January. So Achilles, thanks so much for the support and the question. So the decision version of War in Europe, which I have not played, but I have looked at, is basically mostly a graphical upgrade. However, there are a couple of things that they did change. The big one is that if you'll recall that the SPI War in Europe, well, let me start again. SPI War in Europe is basically two games in the same box, right? It's War in the East and War in the West. And War in the East has a production system for the Germans and the Soviets. War in the West has a replacement schedule, a reinforcement schedule for the Western Allies. And the decision version of War in Europe changes that and gives the Western Allies their own production spiral. So that's the biggest change. Other than that, I think the by far, it's pretty much a straight reprint other than that and some pretty minor stuff. So the smaller models are cheaper, and I haven't looked at the prices in like at least 6 months. So, check where prices are at right now. Used to be you'd pay $1,500 for a laser printer too. And this laser printer, unreliable fucker that it is, cost me, I don't know, about $350, $400, something like that. So the prices do go down sooner or later. It's just a matter of when it becomes practical for more people, right? Based on reliability and price and a number of other things. So anyway, Thursday at 9 p.m. I don't know what that means. Is that it? I haven't put the ticker up yet, so I don't think that's what that is. Thursday at 9 p12e. I don't know what that means, Christoph de Klerk. If you can explain, I will attempt to answer. Very good. Matt Davidson just got back from the Perryville Symposium, setting up Grand Havoc. Very nice. So anyway, do I have any other business to take care of? Because otherwise, I want to get right into the topic because I've got about 25 or 30 games to talk about. And there's... my normal cap is 20 because I know I can get through 20 in a show, right? And I went higher this time because I didn't want to do Oregon. It's 2 years. We'll have 75 more episodes of this, and I didn't want to deal with that. Very good. So yeah, I will talk about this next week when it's live. But Flying Pig, Herman Luttman, and the Black Swan series, the next volume of that is going up on Kickstarter soon, as well, as Scott Bell is mentioning. So I didn't see the original comment, Vince. Thank you. My idea of I will occasionally. I don't dislike having a cocktail now and then. I'm also lazy, and I can just pour whiskey in a glass and drink that. So there's that. And as you might have noticed, because the show got started a little late, it's because I was upstairs doing some stuff, and I Didn't really lose track of time. It just took longer to get down here than I expected it to. So there was no time to mix cocktails or anything like that tonight. So Lagavulin it is. Man, that's good. If you like this kind of thing. If you don't like this kind of thing, you'll probably think you're drinking a burning tire. I hate time zones. So I screw things up as a result of time zones all the time. Nangwaya, thanks for stopping by. Anyway, the only thing left in Thunder on the Mississippi is the sheet of manpower counters, and these are in my standard table tray, so I don't really need to clip those. So the rest of the counters, I'll probably clip a couple of things, but most of the counters will not need to be clipped, and will go in the drawer because I now have a drawer for this of just loose counter sheets. In any case, all right. So let me get the screen share going. I remember to do that a little too late, but I did set this all up, so we've got that going. Let's see where it's at. There we go. All right, and let me put this over here. There we go. That is what we're looking for. All right, let me zoom in a little bit so that it's a little easier to see the stuff on the screen, particularly for anybody unfortunate enough to be looking at the show on their phone, which is normally fine, but there's visual aids this time. All right, so we're going from 2000 to 2003. And yeah, that's about 30 games, and I'm skipping all of the like add-ons and C3I expansions and that kind of stuff. So Scott Rowland, thanks for stopping by. Yeah, Mark is in our thoughts. So we hope that Mark will, continue fighting as he has been fighting this entire time. Let me put it that way. All right. Mike Duncan, what? Is this a serious comment? Because the whole Martian Revolution thing is kind of an old hat for science fiction anyway. But I did not order Red Dust Rebellion. I'm certainly going to get it, and I'm definitely going to play it when I get a chance. I just haven't had the chance. Really? Obviously, I'm going to need to listen to this. So, and it's not even April, so there's that. All right, so Ukraine 43. This is a Mark Simonich game, and this is usually considered to be part of the quote-unquote Zach Bond or Simonich operational series. It's not really a series. It's more of a family because there's subtle differences between all the games, and there isn't a series rulebook or anything like that. These games are all extremely solid as far as I can tell. However, in the case of Ukraine 43 specifically, there is a second, does BGG reflect this? There is a second edition of it from 2015, and I think if this is a game that you are interested in, then you may want to get the second edition, because I believe there are substantial changes between the two editions, such that the second edition is considerably more highly sought after than the first printing. The other deal with this is I haven't the vaguest idea why this has not been reprinted again. The Simonich games tend to go very hot, even for reprints, when GMT puts them up on P500. So I am left with the assumption that Mark Simonich probably is just working on other stuff right now. I do think this will probably get reprinted eventually. It is World War II East Front. It is pretty much... can we pull up some images here? That would be nice. I would like a shot of the entire map if possible. This will have to do. Folks who have played the Third Winter will find this playing area rather familiar, since there's a considerable amount of overlap. And it's not quite the same time era, but it is nevertheless East Front Army Group in the southern sector, let me put it that way. So, Mick646 from Sweden, thanks for stopping by. Is this out? I thought this was still coming. Not that necessarily means that nobody's played it, but I didn't think this was out yet. This is let me see if I can get this straight. Is this the upcoming, or maybe just out, Greg Smith solitaire game from Paper Wars? Am I remembering this correctly? So Well, this is true, but this is also true of Third Winter. So, and in fact, like we were playing the Third Winter when that conflict broke out, and there was probably wasted a whole session on just pointing out things that were happening in relation to where they are on the OCS map. So, all right. In any case, Ukraine 43 is supposed to be really solid, and it's one that I don't have. Okay, Stacking Limit says it's not out yet. It should be out soonish, though, as I recall, because I think that Compass was talking about it pretty recently, as though it was coming right up. Well, it's a different year for one thing. So Stalingrad 42 is basically the German drive toward Stalingrad and the Soviet counterattack in Operation Uranus. So, whereas this is the following year, right? But I have played Stalingrad 42, and it's really good. So, and you know, pretty much the same system to within a certain margin of error. It's already overheating in here, by the way. Perfidious Albion. So because I don't have this, I don't know exactly when it starts and exactly when it stops. So there's that. Perfidious Albion said a couple of weeks past Kursk. Okay, so there's that. And that makes sense. This is one that I would like to have, but I'm happy to wait for, look at this. This does go for decent change on the secondary market. I'm happy to wait for a reprint personally. So there's that. All right, still in the year 2000. Next up is Brandywine. This is the second game in Mark Miklos's Battles of the American Revolution series. Am I getting that right? Battles of the American Revolution. I keep wanting to call it Great Battles of the American Revolution, and that's not what it's called. But if I make that error, then at least I'm not the only one to make that error, because a lot of people do that too. So the only games in this, or the only things I have in this series is the tri-pack that was released of the first three games, which does include this, Guilford, along with Guilford, Saratoga, and Utah Springs. I do remember seeing this series. I want to say it was Saratoga, and looking at the map, it definitely wasn't this, on a table at Origins around the time of its release. But now that I'm looking at it, I think it was Saratoga that I saw. So give or take a year or so. But this was the second volume in the series. There have been 6 other ones, 6 or 8, maybe even 8 other ones after this. Plus, we're going to get some other games of smaller American Revolution battles too. This is a pretty tidy system. It's pretty easy to play. It tends to get played aggressively at WBC, and Mark Miklos is there hosting it at least most years. So worth your time if you're interested in tactical treatments of this subject, I think. And you don't want to deal with... So Tactical American Revolution, you're either looking at this series, you're looking at Battles of the Age of Reason, which is an order of magnitude or 2 more complicated and more work and more time, or you are looking at a variety of different one-off games, like SPI's Monmouth, for example, which is, I think, a related system to the SPI generation of Great Battles of the American Civil War, I think. I might be misremembering that. I have it, but I've never looked at it particularly closely because my counters for SPI's Monmouth, it was the last S&T issue by SPI, by the way. My counters are woefully misregistered. So this is Frank, this is a terrific idea, and we should actually do that. I am quite certain that I do have contact information for Maurice. It has been considered, but I have not reached out to him yet, and I should do so. Thank you for the reminder. This is a good point, actually. I don't know if it's reprinted, but it's going to get reprinted. Commands and Colors Tricorn. This is actually a good call on Justigard's part, because I would have forgotten about it. I had Commands and Colors Tricorn, and then in a fit of rage, because I couldn't get the French expansion, I got rid of it, and now the French expansion's coming back out. I'm not terribly broken up about that. I liked what I saw of Commands and Colors Tricorn. I mean, it's Commands and Colors, right? It's fun to play. But I do have 3 of these. I'm signed up for the second tri-pack of the Great Battles of the, or see, I did it. Battles of the American Revolution, and I will be happy with that for Tactical American Revolution. If I am going to get more American Revolution games, they are going to be strategic or operational level. I don't feel like I need any more tactical coverage on this topic. A lot of people went and voted early today, but do your civic duty, folks. Vote. So, not going to tell you to vote for. That's up to you. But go do it. So, well, yeah, it was very, very French of me to do that. In any case, Brandywine here is the second game in this series, and I believe we'll have one more tonight. Next up is Risorgimento 1859. This is a Richard Berg game. Co-designer Peter Perla listed by BGG, and that's what it says on the box too, even though the resolution of this scan is not great. So this is what it says, the Second Italian War of Independence. And if we look at it, we are going to see that it is a point-to-point map. I don't know if this is has cards or not. I've never owned this. I'm kind of intrigued by it because I don't have any games on the Italian Wars of Independence. And this is, there we go. You are atomistic. Thank you. You are 100% correct about this. It was and of course, Frank's here, so I had to stick my foot in my mouth and embarrass myself. But yes, SPI's Monmouth was indeed another variation in magazine format on the Wellington's Victory system. So, Perfidious Albion mentions Hold the Line. I think that's a tactical game, and it's a block tactical game, and if I had really wanted that, I would have kept Commands and Colors Tricorn. Not that I'm suggesting that there's anything wrong with Hold the Line. I am aware of it. I have no experience with it, and I haven't looked at it at all. So I am going to defer any judgment until possibly later when I look into it. But I don't think I will, because I'm good. Tactical. I'm of the three common levels of war games: strategic, operational, and tactical. I am the least interested in tactical, but maybe that's not the right way to put it. Maybe I'm just pickier when it comes to tactical. So there we go. There we go. Well, it does matter, but I'm not gonna lecture anybody either. So we will not be doing that. Please don't do that in the chat. Thank you. Not that I think we would do that, but I would prefer not to. So Meandering Mike, good for you. Awesome. So Risorgimento looks pretty interesting. It looks like there's some kind of tactical iteration here too. So this is one of the tactical maps. I'd be curious to know how that worked, unless you're like the maps are of the actual battlefields where the battles were fought. I'm not sure how that could be made to work. So I'm a little, well, as usual, Brent kind of cuts it right to the bone here. But I think it would be more accurate to say that I am generally more interested in strategic and operational games. And I am more open to dabbling in topics at the strategic or operational levels than I am at the tactical level. So Patrick Picture says, tactical seems to be where most new gamers want to start. He thinks it's a narrative thing. I don't know if this is true, but let us suppose for the moment that it is, that tactical seems to be where most new gamers start. I think that may be the influence of what we might think of as the very much more popular wing of war games, meaning miniatures games, almost all of which are tactical games. So that might just be the natural next progression from miniatures. I am aware of this, and I am interested in this as well. All right, Perfidious Albion says the strategic map is an independent campaign, whereas the three battles were the most. Oh, so this is another. That's actually not making it less intriguing, actually, because that makes it sound like a little bit like it's got a Cataphract and Justinian type of spin on it, where there's kind of two sets of parallel games in there too. So, and what Joe Perez is saying here mirrors that as well. You can I think you can get equally good narrative out of either tactical or operational or strategic, for that matter. I don't think that your choice of scale is limiting you in terms of narrative. So, but I've certainly seen a lot of narrative emerge in, say, ASL games, for example. So in any case, this one is not particularly rare, and I mean, the rating is not horrendous, but who knows what that means in the case of BGG. I wouldn't put any stock in their rating number. So, are there fewer things to manage in a tactical game? I mean, maybe, but depends on the game, doesn't it? So, two major battles of the campaign, Magenta and Solferino, and then there's this campaign game. So this looks intriguing. I might grab this should I see a copy at a reasonable price. Moving on, and still in the year 2000, we have another Richard Berg game. He was very active at that point. This is going to be Triumph and Glory. Now, this is 5 Napoleonic battles. There's an interesting pedigree, sort of future pedigree, for this system. And that is in the system called Jour de Gloire, which is basically Frederick Bay's sort of second edition of the Triumph and Glory system. We'll take a look at the series here in a second, but this is 5 tactical, or grand tactical, if you like, Napoleonic battles. In this case, Castiglione, Austerlitz, Raab, Aspern, Essling, and Wagram, which, is a good selection of battles. There's a lot of variety there. All right, Craig Alexander says, do more new wargame players come from miniatures or from non-wargame board games? He thinks the popularity of tactical games for new players comes from watching movies. That's plausible, too, actually, from, something like Band of Brothers, I think isn't probably going to spark your interest to go play World in Flames, but it might spark your interest to go learn ASL Starter Kit, for example. This is a really good question, as Brant is pointing out, too, is that what are the real common entry paths for new wargamers, and not just what we people on the internet want to talk about. It's like, obviously everybody's coming in from Twilight Struggle. And I think that at least Twilight Struggle's influence has been a little bit overstated in that way. I think there's still something to that, don't get me wrong, but I mean, I don't know that Twilight Struggle necessarily resulted in a whole lot of people playing Case Blue, if you take my meaning. So, all right, we're on to Breastworks here. All right, this is possible, but it's a lot easier to find, at least in game stores. It's a lot easier to find ASL stuff than it is to find Band Brothers, frankly. So, this is true too. Well, yeah, and it's very much that's very much a sort of very low level tactical type of experience, even though it's also somewhat abstract. So, Patrick Picture says that his new folks have never played minis, although they're interested now because of the tactical games they've taken an interest in. Now, I can verify that at one point it wasn't particularly uncommon for people to come in from RPGs, but I don't know that there's a serious percentage of people using that particular on-ramp to wargaming nowadays. So, this is true. But, Brant, why do you think it costs $1,500? That's because everybody wants it. Everybody needs Case Blue. Yeah, I keep checking for my shelving, and it keeps not being available. I may have to just do a different solution at some point, because eventually I'm going to just give up on IKEA getting in the right shelves. Joe Mentum says the tactical games probably appeal to a lot of veterans, many whose primary experience with the military is at the tactical level. This is plausible. However, this makes me actually want to say out loud a question that I wondered about earlier this week, which is that from a percentage standpoint, what is the percentage of wargamers that served in the military at all? And I would think that percentage is like much higher than it would be in the general population. But I also think that it is probably not a majority. But I'm guessing. And I'm guessing based on the people I game with. Some of whom were in the military, but a lot of whom weren't. So, all right. So, Triumph and Glory. So, there were, We look at, let's see if we can get something sensible out of here. We kind of can. All right, so what we got here is Borodino is the other boxed thing that GMT did. And then there was apparently some kind of add-on in an issue of C3I. And then 1813 Glory's End, was this from Aleph Games Studios? This is an unreleased game. This is not a game that was published. And I don't know who Aleph Games Studio is. Okay, so I have heard of them. I've heard of a couple of these games, but I guess we won't be seeing this one. So in any case, GMT did 2 boxed games, Triumph and Glory and Borodino, which is just Borodino, but that's fine because Borodino's a huge battle. And then something came out in C3I, and then Frederick Bay took the system and ran with it and made some changes, and that version of this system is now called Jour de Gloire. Which also appeared in a much later issue of C3I, by the way, and which I have heard good things about. That is the only game in the series I have, and at some point I would like to try it, but I don't seem to be getting around to that anytime soon, along with everything else that I have to do. So, all right, and Brant says that Aleph is a European publisher, which obviously doesn't surprise me too much. But you know, I don't think we're going to see this particular Berg game from it. This doesn't even say what it's about. Okay, it's about Leipzig. 1813 Glory's End, an appropriate title for Leipzig at that. But this would have been interesting to have seen. So I doubt we'll see this one. So BGG should probably purge it. All right. So Frank says that all of Avalon Hill's early games were tactical games, including Gettysburg, Chancellorsville, Bismarck, U-Boat, Jutland. I mean, there's a good decade and a half there. I am not sure that I would call Avalon Hill's Gettysburg tactical, but it is a battle game, and I'm kind of arbitrarily saying that just based on the number of pieces that you have to work with and the size of the map. And remember, the one I have, which it doesn't differ particularly in that regard, although it kind of does due to one of the optional rules, is the one from the 70s, which is a completely different game than the early Avalon Hill Gettysburg. But it is worth pointing out, Waterloo is another one of these. There's still people playing those things. There were people playing Avalon Hill's Waterloo at WBC. There was like 2 games of that setup. All right, so Justigard says that don't start Jour de Gloire with the C game out of C3I. It doesn't showcase the system well. I'm compared to believe that. Royce says tactical is very straightforward in terms of objectives. Operationally, maybe. I mean, I will agree with it with the analysis here. I don't know that necessarily comes down to objectives. I think it is that a strategic or operational level game is trying to include more things that it is simulating. Particularly strategic games that deal with politics. But on the other hand, you've got other examples of strategic games that don't have any political element into them at all, unless the players put it in by hand. Things like Quartermaster General, for example, which, you know, a lot of people, including myself, have described as sort of Risk-like. And I think that's broadly an accurate statement, but I think it probably will give wargamers a falsely negative impression of Quartermaster General. Darren Leveloff came from RPGs. Very interesting. Welcome back to the show, by the way, Darren. Thanks for coming. Okay, so a bunch of Avalon Hill classics. War at Sea is another one. Although that originally appeared from somebody else, I thought I might be misremembering that because there's a kind of a number of games in that space. Stalingrad, which in Avalon Hill Stalingrad is, in my opinion, not a game that anybody needs to play nowadays unless you're trying it strictly for historical interest, which would make it worth a whirl, but it is not a it's not a game that I think holds up particularly well. I mean, I think you're better off playing Russian campaign. So, all right. In any case, moving on from Triumph and Glory and associated discussions. This is another interesting one, and also in the year 2000. This is a game by David Fox, Austerlitz, Napoleon's Greatest Victory. Now this, what do we have for pictures here? Not a lot. Not a lot at all. I was hoping for just some kind of panoramic map image, and I guess we'll have to live with this. You can kind of see how this is laid out here. So this looks to me to be a 4-map game on Austerlitz. This is another one that I don't seem to hear very much about nowadays. I don't know that that's necessarily because it's not any good. Although its rating is not great, but it's BGG, and I don't know that anybody should draw any conclusions from that, right? Pretty Albion says it's a massive game, but it is an orphaned system. Oh yeah, you can see here the great battles of the Napoleonic Wars that looks like they tried to spin up at one point. Has designer David Fox done anything else? Yes, including at least one thing that we'll be discussing tonight. And he had a hand in Banish All Their Fears? Oh, how about that? Okay, so David Fox is still active. Now, I haven't played it, but I have Banish All Their Fears, and I bought it more or less because I wanted to see the command system. Yes, exactly AD. This is exactly how I meant it. So, all right. So, I'm going to go back here. And to go back to Austerlitz, we don't have like a ton of information on BGG for this, and I don't really have any spectacular insights on it. But 4 to 8 hours, that sounds probably very optimistic, to be honest. Nor is it telling us how big it is, but it does look like a 4-map game, so it does look kind of large. Yes, you can actually, Mean Joe Green, you can actually go to GMT's website. I'll show you. I'll end up doing this next week. If you go to games, go to all games. Actually, better idea. Go to bestsellers current year and bestsellers all time. So it's in the drop down under games. So there you go. So yes, you absolutely can. Twilight Struggle's on top. All time, Twilight Struggle. Battle Line. Actually, we're going to talk about Battle Line tonight. How about that? I don't want spoilers. All right, next, still in the year 2000 is the first edition of The 3 Days of Gettysburg by Richard Berg. Berg was a busy fella at this particular time. I will just point that out. I never pay any attention to the top 10 in a newsletter, though, to be honest. I could just look at that if I want it. So this is a reimagining, if you will, with a substantially different system of the SPI Classic Terrible Swift Sword, also designed by Richard Berg. Although other designers had a hand in the evolution of, including Mark Herman, had a hand in the evolution of that system while SPI had it. I don't know, without thinking about it harder than I've done, I don't know that many of those pieces of evolution that happened in the SPI era necessarily made it into the GMT version of the game. Because to me, it feels like a very different game. Any of the GMT games feel like very different games from any of the SPI games. Let me put it that way. Frank, thanks for stopping by. Arnold Power Shower Campaign. I'm not sure I want to know what that is. So Frank, thanks for stopping by. Any case, 3 Days of Gettysburg. I played the 3rd edition of this. And we had a great time with it. Now, I will mention that there is a 4th or deluxe edition of this on P500 right now. The old edition, this 1st edition doesn't go for as much as the 3rd edition does, because that's kind of the one that folks tend to want. Mike Reed asks, so I tend to prefer the chit pull system for a couple of reasons. Not necessarily just because it's a little more evenly paced than I Go, You Go, where everybody goes. And if you think about it, although Gettysburg is an interesting example because it's a meeting engagement, or at least it starts out that way, and if you're playing on the first day, you don't necessarily have that much stuff to work with to tie you down for long turns. But eventually you will have a lot of stuff to tie you down for very long turns. And I Go, You Go mechanic is maybe not optimal for that type of situation. So that is one reason to prefer the chit pull mechanic. The other reason is because I kind of like the way it works to model command efficiency and inefficiency. I think it's a kind of a tidy way to handle that. Although it might be said that it is maybe a little more convoluted than it necessarily needs to be. All right. So Joe Perez says that had high hopes for Austerlitz, but the rules were supposed to be a disaster. Looked interesting with a few multi-hex counters, 3 to 4 hexes. There's a couple of GBOH counters that are like 4 hex or even 6 hex counters. So I have it's Regiments brand, just so you know. And as Perfidious, I mean, I didn't even mention the graphical change. Obviously, the graphics were upgraded. But the graphics were also upgraded after the first edition of 3 Days of Gettysburg, too. And I think they maps might be getting redrawn again for the new edition that should be out sometime next year, I think. So this is... there was a TSR edition, too. So there is a sense in which this is a continuous evolution from, the SPI days to now. But there's also like a big gap in change that hits right when this comes out from GMT. This is the start of GMT's iteration of the Great Battles of the American Civil War series. So, well, hey, you could play it in squads. Remember, you are free to go patronize Critical Hit and pick up their American Civil War squad leader materials. Best of luck with that, but that option is available for those who are sufficiently insane. So, all right. I don't know specifically who the team is, but Dick is kind of the honcho of the GBACW. So they are working on an update of 3 Dog. It is already on P500. So, well, I mean, So Brandt likes to joke that it takes longer to play the game than it did to fight the actual battle, which is true. But if you think about it, that is the case with essentially every single tactical war game ever, right? You've got ASL scenarios that might take you as little as a couple hours, but which were over in 10 minutes or less in real life, right? So, I think it's a bit of a vacuous point, to be honest about it. So there's that. Now, there are folks that have a high opinion of the ATS stuff, and I was talking to one of our local guys about that last week, in fact, and I will at some point play the advanced Tobruk system. That does not mean I need to give those folks any money. So, in any case, there were a variety of other topics too, and I would expect to see some kind of ASL adaptation of Vietnam as well, but I think that's more likely to come out from Multi-Man. So, in fairness, Shiloh in the new system is pretty hairy. I mean, it's like the most complicated game in the series, just situationally based on the 3 different levels of woods, and you got special rules and all this other stuff. So there's that. All right, so moving on, I think we're going to get to another GBACW game here this evening as well. Still in 2000, Vance von Bory's Army Group North, I should say, Barbarossa Army Group North. It's Watertown. So back in the day, I did have Army Group Center and Army Group South, and never played, well, at the time anyway, didn't play either of them. And I still wouldn't say I have played this series at its full potential. I've played a couple of the small scenarios out of a couple of the games. So this is the third in the Barbarossa series, which is kind of a follow-up to Vance's earlier game Typhoon, which uses more or less the same system, but there are some changes, and I would personally like to see an updated version of Typhoon. So Army Group North, incidentally, is probably the next. So this is the GMT East Front series. Okay, it consists of 5 or 6 games: Army Groups Center, North, and South, and then Kiev de Rostov and Barbarossa, Kiev de Rostov, and Crimea. There's also Typhoon, the sort of progenitor game, but you could, if you're going to call Typhoon the progenitor game, it's closer to where the system is here in the Barbarossa games than it was when Vance was working on a system with a lot of very similar ideas for 3W. That game is East Front Battles. I've got it in the other room. But this is a pretty interesting series that I think a lot of people will probably enjoy more playing solitaire, because think about, this is basically the beginning of Operation Barbarossa through something like December of 1941. So the Soviets are going to get kicked around a lot, and a lot of folks will not find that to be a particularly fun experience. And right when the Soviets start to kind of be counterattacking regularly and at least efficiently some of the time is kind of when all these games stop. In addition, there are supposed to be a bunch of other games that'll take the thing all the way to Stalingrad, but none of that seems to be on the immediate horizon. In the meantime, we've been waiting for the reprints of Army Group Center, South, and North for a long time. We finally got Center. We're going to get North next. So this is on the reprint track. I do predict we will see this next year from a reprint of it from GMT. In the meantime, Noble Knight wants $120 for it, and some enterprising individual on eBay would like $226.11, which is probably a bid price to be fair. Now, I do think there's a lot to like about this game system and these games as a whole, but I do wish we'd get them a little faster. Is the only thing. I had something else to say about these particular games as well. I did end up rebuying them. I ended up getting a couple of them. I got the ones when I got back into wargaming in around 2007, 2008. I picked up the ones that were available at the time, which was Crimea and Kiev to Rostov. And I eventually dumped those after sitting on them for I played a couple scenarios and I liked them, but it's like, I can't get the rest of the series because they're not coming out. Because my normal approach is I'll just wait for the reprint. I'm cool. But then the reprint's been treading water for like 15 years. So this sounds like it might be correct. So once I got back into wargaming, over the span of 2 or 3 years, I did reacquire all of these games, except for Army Group Center, because for some reason the price was really high on Army Group Center, and I knew the reprint was coming. So I just waited for the reprint. So I've got an updated Army Group Center and the old ones and all the other ones, and they're all punched and ready to go, but we won't be playing them anytime soon. There is a fascinating compare and contrast to be done between the East Front series and OCS. They are very similar systems in many ways at kind of a higher level, and very different series in a lot of other ways. I want to say Nathan at Wise Guy History has done a video doing just that, of comparing and contrasting these and OCS. So go ahead and look for that. This is exactly my point. Yeah. So the good news is that when I did rebuy them, I didn't pay more than like a new game price. So somewhere between 50 and $90 for each one is what I paid. And I think somebody made me a really sweetheart deal on Kiev to Rostov, which was at that point was like the one that I had to rebuy that was the hardest to get. So Destroyed Bridges. So interesting series. Can't wait to see the new version of Army Group North. That said, I do kind of feel like Army Group North, in part because it ends when it does, I do kind of feel like Army Group North is the least interesting of the three between North, Center, and South. All right. And probably the most interesting is probably Army Group South, although I think Center's got a lot going for it just topically. But if you're playing Army Group South, then that opens you up to the possibility of adding Kiev to Rostov to it, which is, I think, the most interesting situationally of all the games in the series, with a possible exception of Typhoon. And when I say I rebought them all, I do include Typhoon in that too. All right, Wilderness War. This is turns out to have been a very influential game. This is, I want to say, Volko's first published design. And this is a game that still gets played and still gets reprinted by GMT. I have still not played it. I should probably do that, but, you know, I got a lot to do, and I don't have time to do all the stuff I got to do already. So Blitzkrieg in the South is the earlier predecessor. It is, to some extent, a progenitor of the East Front system and does have some similar elements like the asymmetric turn structure. This would, to give Mike, to give you a real answer to this question, I think I would need to actually dedicate some time to it, and I haven't had the chance to do that. I do have both Blitzkrieg in the South and the follow-up to that Joe Youst did after Vance had fled to GMT. Perhaps fled is an unkind way to put it. I don't know that there was any flight involved, but you know what I'm saying. He ended up working on different stuff. Joe Youst did one follow-up, that is Spires of the Kremlin, and I have that too. So Marty says that Wilderness War still holds up. And this is a point-to-point card-driven game, by the way, but it's I don't know, because I haven't played it, exactly kind of where on the CDG spectrum it falls. Is it kind of more like For the People, or more like Washington's War, or more like Paths of Glory? There's a lot of different kind of roads through the territory that is card-driven games at this point. The good news on Blitzkrieg in the South is you can normally get it very inexpensively. So if you want to try it out, try out that particular system, you can do so without spending a ton of money. So Adam Misnick says that Wilderness War has a nice operational feel. I wish the system was applied to the American Revolution. Well, it's definitely a different implementation of the CDG idea than Washington's War is, or For the We the People, I suppose, and looks different from For the People as well. So, John says that Wilderness War doesn't do it for him, despite loving the topic and CDGs. Volka was the original designer on the original Sword of Rome Clearly, I feel like I need some more information on this statement. Maybe I can talk to Volko about it. So, he's always been a good sport about coming on the show after all. So, this is the name of the game. Hold on. Let's not overcomplicate it. All right, so let me hide this for a second so folks can actually see this. So the game that we're talking about here is this, but it's not super duper obvious that the title is Blitzkrieg in the South, is it? If you look at the side, it says Blitzkrieg in the South, East Front Battles 1, makes it look like part of a series, and it kind of is. But if you look at the cover, it looks like the title is East Front Battles 1. East Front Battles 2 is this game, Spires of the Kremlin. And this is basically... trying to see if I could tell on the back exactly when this starts. There were supposed to have been 5 games in this series. These are the only 2 that ever came out. This is Operation Typhoon. This is what it says on the back. October to December 1941, ends with the Soviet counteroffensive in January 15th, 42. So, as far as Typhoon games go, we're good. I like the topic of Operation Typhoon, so that is one reason why I wanted that particular game. I was really kind of after just Spires of the Kremlin, and I ended up with a package deal for both games. So, that's why I've got them both. All right, back to the slideshow, and let's move along here because we're almost an hour in, and I've gone through well under half of the total titles. Zero, The Rise and Fall of the Imperial Japanese Air Force. Now, this is a Dan Versen design. Let me get the right... There we go. Let me get the right thing going on. This is part of the Down in Flames series. It's a World War II air combat game. And there are some newer games in this series that I would recommend looking at unless you specifically want to see Pacific air combat. And I don't know that anybody is overthinking it to that extent for a card game or this card game, given the potential audience. Let me put it that way. I do actually have this. I have not tried to play it, but there's folks that really like it. The game system in general, the Down in Flames game. I don't know that... that anybody has particularly mentioned this to me. I thought that was some kind of card organizer on this picture. By the way, it is not. It is someone's radiator. So, in any case, let's move on because I don't have a lot to say about that. However, we're back to Vance von Boris and the year 2001 with his Kasserine Rommel's Battles for Tunisia, or Rommel's Battle for Tunisia. So this is Kasserine Pass, and we got a little bit of a picture. This is a scenario map out of a C3I issue, so that doesn't really help us a whole lot. You get the very classic Roger McGowan cover here. The cover art that is striking enough that it kind of has become to some extent synonymous with GMT. Yeah, a bunch of early Dan Versen stuff did appear. Hornet, I believe Hornet was Hornet Leader, I think, also first appeared from GMT. So, honestly, this level of historical and technical verisimilitude, you're probably playing the wrong game. It is not the kind of game where I think if you are going to have a problem with that, which I think is reasonable, I think maybe this is not the game for you, as I think it's frankly not the game for me. So, do we have a shot of the entire map? Not really, no. Not really, no. Well, it's Kasserine Pass, folks. 1942, Americans versus Germans with possibly some Italians, depending on exactly what it covers. Good topic. The rating is not bad, and it is sort of a mid-period Vance von Boris design, and the counters, I think, are pretty nice. And you might notice at the bottom here, counter art by Mark Simonich, which explains why the counters are really nice. So, normally, the ad comes before Mo, normally, but depends what Mo's got going on that particular night, too. So, interesting looking game, and this is another one that shouldn't go for a huge pile of money. And in fact, that's pretty much what we see here. This is, ballpark of what you'd pay for a new game nowadays. Flagship. This isn't ringing a bell for me. Was this something that came out, or is this a story I haven't heard or have forgotten about? That's either one of those things is possible. There is some video on this game, by the way. So let's move through this. And since we are at exactly the halfway point, let us hear very briefly from our good friends at Noble Knight Games. And I'll have an update on the Noble Knight campaign, which I have no update, but I'll tell you that there's no update after the show, after this message.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world. Just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, so big thanks once again to our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsor of the Counter Clipping Show. So the current at Noble Knight campaign, you'll notice that if you're new here, let me fix that real quick. Hold on. All right. So we're shooting to get a copy of Advanced European Theater of Operations, and we're about 17% of the way there as of the last update, meaning when I got the monthly disbursement of store credit from Noble Knight. So there's a affiliate link in the video description. If anybody wants to buy stuff from Noble Knight and uses that affiliate link, I get a little bit of kickback in the form of store credit, and eventually that will pile up to be enough to get a copy of Advanced European Theater of Operations to go with my Advanced Pacific Theater. The game system looks like it has some interesting things in it. And I actually think that the previous version, the TSR one, actually has some things going for it too. So thank you, Noble Knight. All right, so Marty says that Flagship came out in the late 90s. It flopped hard. Was one of the reasons why GMT went to P500. If that's the case, we should have covered it in the last episode. I'd have to look at it. So, all right. Yeah, Decision at Kasserine is a different game, but it's also a Vance von Boris design, I believe. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. As soon as I get the editing done, any time now, pretty much. All right. So next up is back to the slideshow. There we go. All right, back to the slideshow for Ted Racer's Clash of Giants. Now, this is so there's kind of two different forks of the Clash of Giants system. This is, by the way, a more or less operational chit pull design. Okay, and Ted tends to do very well in that space. There are 2 World War I volumes. There's this and Clash of Giants 2. And then there is Clash of Giants Civil War, which has some Civil War battles. Now, this is Tannenberg and the Marne, and it's not the battles, but the campaigns. At least that's how it's pitched. This was a series I was very seriously looking at one point. And then I watched some video on one of the games. It may have been the Civil War one. And I'm not sure if that was before or after I got into Civil War wargaming. I think it was before. AD, thanks for stopping by. Well, we should get to it tonight then, unless I skipped it for not any reason I'd be aware of, which could happen. In any case, it's a pretty interesting looking game, and I was highly interested in the World War I version. Then I saw some video on the Civil War version, and I went really cold on it. So I never did investigate this game system. It is probably worth a look. Just a Guard says he'd rather GMT reprint the thing, and hey, I'd be fine with that, but that's got to work for GMT too. The good news is they've got a built-in system for catching that stuff. If you're gonna if you want to reprint something, but you're not sure if there's a market for it, that is literally the problem that the GMT P500 system was designed to solve. So, all right. And again, this is Tannenberg and the Marne. I'm not sure when we're going to get to the other one. They're all 3 listed here. They are. This is Clash of Giants 2 from 2006. So the next episode of the Best of GMT, we'll talk about this, I guess. And this is Ypres and Galicia. So each of the games have like one east front and one west front. So moving along, we have this thing, 30 Years War. Now, this is a David Fox and Mike Welker design, and it is a point-to-point, I believe, card-driven game as well. And this is another one of those games that I was looking at very seriously. However, I never did get a copy of it, and at this point, I think my 30 Years War itch is going to be scratched better by Cuius Regio than it will be by this, because that is a hex map, as opposed to the point-to-point map here. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with the point-to-point map. And in other ways, this might be a better topic for a point-to-point map. So I don't know. We'll see. Have I ever played a 30 Years War game? I don't think I have. It is an interesting topic, however. Just a Guard also points out that Mike Welker was the other fella involved in Vanish All Their Fears, along with David Fox. So apparently they're kind of on the same wavelength. Not a bad looking map at all, I don't think, by the way. The counters look a lot like you'd expect these counters to look like in this period from GMT. So this is what's the rating? 6.9, which is not bad. And you know, I don't seem to hear much about people playing this. I do like the cover though. I do like the cover. It does kind of look like an Ars Magica 5th edition book, to be honest. Yes, I am aware of this, but I don't know that this will be out all that soon either. I think the next game in that series is I think, I'm happy to accept a correction on this kind of stuff. I think the next game using that system will be No Peace for 7 years, I think, which, yeah, I'm cool with that. I'll buy that. I could use a good 7 Years War game too. I've got a couple, but probably the most like noteworthy thing that I have is really Freddy the Great. But I also do have the old 7 Years War from Joe Miranda that came out in S&T in the 90s, I want to say, something like that. Well, at least it's not incredibly prominent. David Imperato says that somebody redid the rule book. So I don't know if this was another one of those sort of unpolished things where the rule book was a big mess. GMT has been known to do that. They're certainly making some efforts to do it less nowadays. The GMT update did not come out, probably due to weekend at the warehouse or GMT, whatever just happened. But we probably should get it soon. It wouldn't surprise me if it was this week. So good cover. In any case, let's move along. To Reds, the Russian Civil War, another Ted Racer design. Ted and David Fox and Richard Berg were super busy during this time. What can I say? So this is a game about the Russian Civil War. It is on a hex map, and we actually do have, I don't know if we have a good scan of the map, but at least this will give you a sense. Of course, it's upside down. Gosh darn it. I've played this, and I think it's pretty good. There are folks who feel like it's very difficult for the whites to win. That's probably true, but it's also probably the historical fact as well that it's difficult for the whites to win this. So I do think you could play this in a couple hours too. It's not a long game. It plays pretty quickly. It's easy to play. I enjoyed this tremendously. I've got this. I'm not getting rid of it. So if you want kind of the ultimate Russian Civil War gaming experience, you probably want to look at Triumph of Chaos, but you also probably need to deal with the enormous amount of errata that comes with Triumph of Chaos 2nd edition. I don't know about the 1st edition because I have the 2nd one. And in the 2nd edition, there's a lot of errata, a lot. I don't see a good shot of the map, but in any case, Reds is very good. And I actually also like this cover too, for what that's worth. Pretty good BGG rating as well. Here's another one that I have but haven't played. This is Caesar and Alexandria. This is part of the Great Battles of History series. And the interesting thing about this, once again, I'm going to struggle while I attempt to find a friggin' map. One of the interesting things about this is that it is, for all intents and purposes, an ancient city battle. Which is something we almost never see. And you can see that a good chunk of the map is the city of Alexandria. So they're potentially, at least, the Romans are going to be fighting block by block for this. This immediately jumped out at me as something that I wanted. I did eventually get a copy. And I guess the most annoying thing, I'm pretty sure mine is punched too. I think the most annoying thing about it is a different thickness of box than every other game in this series. So, David Kittleson just finished the GMT update. So, yeah, I'll agree with this sentiment. Triumph of Chaos has a lot of chrome, but people who are super duper into the topic of the Russian Civil War and don't want to, or can't swing the 6 players that you really want to play the SPI Russian Civil War, I'd point them at Reds, to be honest. But they're both fundamentally two-sided games, right? In Triumph of Chaos, there's kind of this complicated political, it's not really that complicated, but it looks complicated. There's this kind of complicated political system where you've got a track and different factions will move up and down on the track, and that'll determine who they're allied to at the moment. So there's a lot of interesting mechanical things happening in Triumph of Chaos. In contrast, Reds is far more streamlined and digestible. And like I said, I would estimate it to be a 2, maybe 4-hour game. It's pretty easy to play. As Mike Reed pops up, Carl, thanks for stopping by. I find this completely understandable, actually. I like the game too. The game's good. Mike Reed says that Caesar and Alexandria is an interesting take. See it pop up on the GBACW Gringo map. That's interesting. I haven't really looked at Gringo, even though I have it. So I will have to do that. In any case, interesting looking game. I do have it. I do want to play it sooner or later. And eventually we will get to this. It's just a matter of getting back to GBOH at some point. And of course, this is Richard Berg, Mark Herman. I don't know what it says on the cover. Richard Berg and Mark Herman. Alan Ray is the longtime developer of this series. So that's where that's coming from. All right, now we have officially now started a new series called Great Battles of the American Civil War from GMT with this volume 2. This is Red Badge of Courage. This is 1st and 2nd Manassas. So I have this one as well. I have all of the GBACW games, actually. All the ones that GMT has done, and the expansion for Gringo, which somebody was kind enough to send me. Thank you very much. As well as all the ones from SPI now. And weirdly, well, I guess I don't have the in-between ones that like Simulations Design and that stuff, because I don't need that. All that stuff got redone for the most part. Brad, thanks for stopping by. So, very nice. Very nice. And like I said, these are interesting battles. Remember, it's 1st and 2nd Manassas, so you've got 1861 and 1862. Yeah. So, it's... Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah. Okay. So you've got Beauregard versus, I have to do it from memory because I can't read the cover. 1st Manassas is Beauregard against McDowell, and 2nd Manassas is Lee versus John Pope, who is a bum. So possibly even worse of a bum than the fairly hapless McDowell, to be honest about it. But it's a big game too, by the way. Does it say? Usually this is just like copied off the back of the box or from the website. 1,100 counters, 2 maps, developed by John Olson. So moving along. So I mentioned Precious Glory at one point, I don't know, a year or two ago, and that I didn't seem to see very many people talking about it. And Steve Dole just kind of picked up the gauntlet there and did some video on Precious Glory. Now, this is a Bob Kalinowski design, who would later do some more work from GMT, I'm going to have a hard time keeping track of this. Clash of Monarchs, I believe. From Moe's Game Table, thanks for stopping by. Bull Run is an interesting battle, actually. I've heard good things about Ice's Manassas game as well. On the other hand, I've also heard good things about the map, and I find the map to be an atrocious eyesore in Iron Crown's Manassas game, to be honest about it. Iron Crown was more than capable of doing good-looking maps. Witness the Middle-earth role-playing stuff. But not there, in my opinion. Stuart! Speaking of Iron Crown's Manassas. So... All right, so Stuart is mentioning that Red Badge of Courage is a controversial title choice. I've actually never read the book. I might have read the book, but if I did, I was a kid and I don't remember it at all. It's probably Chancellorsville rather than Bull Run, but, you know, that's fine. Berg was doesn't feel like exactly a stickler about titles. To say the least. All right, so back to Precious Glory. This is Rossbach, Leuthen, Zorndorf, and Torgau, 4 battles of Frederick the Great. And from what I understand, it's not a bad system. It just kind of seems to have dropped off the radar. The rating is, Midland, but again, doesn't mean very much because it's BGG. And there was a follow-up, Precious Glory 2 as well. So if you liked this system and you want more of it, then you do have Precious Glory 2. And I believe you can backfit the Precious Glory 2 rules to play the battles from the first game as well. If you're interested in this, you might want to pick up both of them. Mike says that opaque rulebooks, errata, and development holes. I think this is probably accurate. And that might be why it maybe isn't rated as high. I think I realize this is anecdotal, but I feel like I have more of a sense that this has been forgotten about because I don't hear anybody talking about it, right? Other than, the couple of times I've mentioned it. So, also, these should not be an obscene amount of money either. So there you go. So if you are interested in these or are interested in this sort of grand tactical take on Frederick the Great, here you go. The counters look pretty good. The maps look pretty good. There's nothing wrong with these. I had an opportunity to pick them up 5 or 6 years ago at from John Kisner, actually. I think it was John's stuff that he had brought in to dump, but somebody had him that they were trying to deal him at a Buckeye Game Fest years ago, and I probably should have grabbed him at the time, and I didn't. So, all right, moving on to Musket and Pike. This accursed Civil War. Is this the first in this series? I think it might be. Either this or... No, this is the first in the series. So this is English Civil War tactical stuff. Musket and Pike. They've pretty much completely redone the counters for these. If you bought the dual pack, which bluntly I think is the way to go with this stuff now. Eric Goebel picked up Precious Glory 2. David Imperato also mentions that the rulebook was problematic. 2 players. Hey, you know what? We're not talking about that tonight, but I do have playthrough video of Soviet Dawn on the channel. It's a complete game playthrough. I'm not sure I got everything right, but you know, it's a great time, and I liked it enough that I bought the much fancier new version from Worthington. So as you can see, you've got these sort of phalanx shaped counters here too that cover 2 hexes. This is a really intriguing system on a period that I have done very, very little with. So I do want to get to Musket and Pike at some point. I just don't necessarily know when that's going to be. And we might want to get to Banish All Their Fears first because they have that intriguing command system. So Eric from Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles, thanks for coming by. So this is one of the 2 games included in the Musket and Pike dual pack. I don't remember offhand if it's on P500, but we did talk to Ben Hull at one point, and there will be a Musket and Pike dual pack 2, which will presumably will be volumes 3 and 4 in the series. And therefore, I am happy to just wait for that, given all the other things. But it's a period that I don't have a lot of representation for, and I don't know how enthusiastic I necessarily am about English Civil War stuff, but some of the stuff with Gustavus Adolphus and stuff that could be potentially more interesting, I think. And I'm not sure. I must have just hit this. This is the dual pack, which includes both This Accursed Civil War and Sweden Fights On. All right, next up is, frankly, a total classic, and I don't know why this has languished out of print for as long as it has. There have been at least 2 printings of it already, maybe 3. Let's look at versions here. BGG doesn't list it, but in this instance, I trust me more than I trust BGG to be comprehensive about it. All right, and yes, folks, do like the video. It really does help. All right, so Stuart says, didn't click with Musket and Pike, but enjoyed Banish All Their Fears. I am intrigued by Banish All Their Fears specifically because of the command system, which is not shared with Musket and Pike, even though that whole thing is a fork off of Musket and Pike. William Ahrens says that Stephen Crane, who wrote the book The Red Badge of Courage, was vague about what battle it was supposed to be. And here's the reason, because it was supposed to be about the soldiers, not about whoever was in charge. So the Napoleonic Wars, this is a Mark McLaughlin game. I think the design credited here says game designed by Mark McLaughlin on the cover, so we're going with that. I've played this multiple times. I think it is a terrific multiplayer game. I think it's a little less engaging as a 2-player game, frankly. Oh, very good. HUN644 New clarifies that Musket and Pike Dual Pack 2 has already made its number. If we're talking about Musket and Pike Dual Pack number 1, it's in a 2-inch box, which is maybe a little small. If we're talking about the Napoleonic Wars, also in a 2-inch box, which is maybe a little small, especially since I do expect GMT to reprint this at some point. And if they do, I will be personally offended if they do not give it a deluxe treatment with a mounted map and all that jazz. At that point, we better get a 3-inch box, because there's a deck of cards that's about that thick that comes in this game. And that and a mounted map means, and This is one of the rare games that I am happy to store in baggies, though, to be honest about it. I'm like, oh, you want to be the Prussians? Here's the bag with all the Prussian stuff in it. And they're, except for the cards, obviously. Justigard says that Dual Pack 1 is a 3-inch box. I might be thinking of Banish All Their Fears. I actually think it's a 2.5-inch box. It might be 3-inch. I don't know. Somebody should really put out like a 4-inch box for Panzer right about now, huh? So, in any case, this is a point-to-point card-driven game with a very traditional sort of for-the-people-esque card game model. And the combat resolution is buckets of dice combat, which I think is fun. So I've had a great time with this. I've pimped my version out with different colored dice for all the different factions, like a lot of different colored dice for all the different factions. But I think this game is tremendous fun. I do think it functions best as a multiplayer game. So you're better off with 4 or 5 people rather than with 2 or 3, in my opinion. In fact, 3 would feel really weird, to be honest. Marty's right about this. This is not a great historical simulation, but it is a riot to play. It's got a lot of cool Napoleonic flavor. So if you're looking for a serious, in-depth historical simulation of the Napoleonic period, not your game, but it is a terrific game that is a lot of fun to play. And there were a bunch of people playing. There's a whole room of people playing this at WBC. I'll mention that. So, next up is von Manstein's Backhand Blow by Dirk Blenneman. Let's look him up in a moment here. So this is February 1943, and this is the turning the tables system pioneered in earlier East Front games. I want to look at Dirk Blenneman specifically. Yeah, he's done some stuff with VUCA. As well as a number of other publishers. Isn't this? Yeah, Moments in History. Okay. So there's some interesting things in the ludography here. Turning the Tables, published by, once again, Moments in History. And I've never owned anything from Moments in History. So, in any case, I'm not crazy about the cover here, but it's a good title, and it is the famous Backhand Blow of von Manstein. So, and it looks like we don't have a components list here or anything. I'd kind of like to see a map. Well, here's something. Not much, though. Not particularly expensive game. Let me put it that way. Yeah, I think I counted... I might be misremembering the number, so take this as like plus or minus 1, but I think I counted 7 or 8 tables of Napoleonic Wars getting played in that room at WBC this year. So, David Imperato says, von Manstein is a good game. He made a few good points for Turning Point simulations. That was sold by Critical. Oh, okay. Turning Point is the system we're talking about here. Yeah, I would just rather not... Was this called, what was this called, though? I think I know the game you're talking about. And I'm drawing a blank on it at the moment. I have kind of gone through the David James Ritchie ludography with some attention paid because I think he was an interesting designer of war games, but he also did RPG stuff. He worked for TSR and did a bunch of D&D modules, for example. So... Lost Victory. Thank you, Joe Perez. This is, in fact, the exact game that I think we were thinking of that was done by David James Ritchie. The late David James Ritchie, unfortunately. Passed away far too young. All right, so there's Turning the Tables. Again, this is sort of the parent game of that system. And this is also East Front operational, for what that's worth. So we have the Glory series. I think we did the first one in episode 2 of this sequence. This is Richard Berg trying to basically do something more or less in the same space as Great Battles of the American Civil War, but without as burdensome a system. for those who consider it burdensome anyway, I'm pretty comfortable with it, actually. I mean, not in the sense of absolutely knowing the rules, because that's bullshit, but I'm comfortable with continuing to explore GBACW. The Glory system, on the other hand, is much easier to play, and there are 3 volumes in this series. This one covers Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. And there's a Glory 3 as well. I saw this on a shelf at Noble Knight, actually. So David Imperato says that the games that Dirk Blenneman made for Critical Hit were very good. This is true. So this is, again, not a particularly outrageously expensive game to pick up on the secondary market if you decide you need to. I'm pretty sure this is where we saw it, but I don't know. We spent a lot of time. I don't know about a lot of time, but we probably spent an hour just kind of walking around seeing what was going on this year, since it was on the second year they were there. So, well, yeah, eventually he did, but at the time, very busy man, right? Here we go back to the great, I did it again, Battles of the American Revolution. This is Guilford Courthouse. This is the third, this is the third game in this series, and this is the last game, unless you count Utah Springs, which maybe you do, to appear in the tri-pack format. So, interesting. Stewart says that Glory 2 made significant changes from Glory 1 for the better and includes rules and some counters for updating to the new rules. So I guess what that means is if you investigate Glory, also Stigler speaks very highly of the Glory system as well, by the way. So, it's one that's kind of on my list, but it's not like a top priority to obtain. They're not outrageously expensive. Whose version of this is this? Or is this a mock-up? This is a mock-up. Okay. Cool looking box, though. I think this is a cool looking box. And I think it is Guilford that does include Utah. Yeah, okay, you can see that here. It does include the Battle of Utah Springs, which is always also included in this tri-pack if you get that. So, I don't remember if I saw Here I Stand or Virgin Queen, but we just might not have been there the right day, too. So there's that. I do kind of feel like, to some extent, I've got pretty good coverage of tactical/grand tactical American Civil War between GBACW and various things that Herman has done in multiple series now, and which includes Blind Swords and Black Swan and Tattered Flags and whatever the system from what even was it for Champion Hill was. All variations on a theme. Tattered Flags is kind of its own thing, but and I do have a video coming up about that, by the way, at least an unboxing of the Wheatfield game, which looks pretty intriguing, I gotta say. Shattered Union, there you go. Thank you, Alistair. That's the game. That is this series of streamlined games of generally smaller battles, streamlined from the Blind Sword system. We put it that way. So, all right. So moving on from Guilford, we have another Mark Simonich classic, Ardennes 44. This is the Battle of the Bulge, obviously. And it's pretty much the whole thing. Does it tell me exactly when it ends? If it ends around Christmas of 44, that's generally fine. It does not, but that's okay. We're all basically familiar with this basic setup. The implementation here is very solid. If you don't have a Bulge game and are looking for one, this is one that I would tend to point people towards. Somebody who has a bunch of Bulge games and wants the most, a sort of more elaborate simulation, I would point to things like Wacht am Rhein or The Last Gamble or a couple of other things. This is one I would unhesitatingly recommend to even relatively inexperienced wargamers. If you play the whole thing, it probably does take a couple of days. It's not super duper fast, but it is 2 maps, which several of the games in the series are smaller than that. So I think I knew this. I'm kind of glad they went with Ardennes 44, since it let Bruno have Time for Trumpets. Of course, Time for Trumpets named after the book, right? So, Alistair's got Hill of Death. He found the component quality a bit meh. So that is it's a print-on-demand publication, and it's not done by Blue Panther. And I forget who did it, but they don't appear to be doing quite as nice a job as Blue Panther on that kind of stuff. The game itself looks pretty good. So, and there's not that many games on Champion Hill. So there's that. Caleb Elledge. Okay, awesome. Thanks for stopping by. This was the first war game he played. So there we go. Designer Tony Curtis, Mark Simonich. Well, it says Mark Simonich on the cover, so we're going with that. I think Tony, probably the developer, and or did other stuff for the game, because he was one of the principals at GMT, and I believe still is, basically. But this is a very solid game. If you're looking for a bulge game, again, this is one that I generally point people to. So Mike Reed says this is much superior to Bulge 81. Okay, but I mean, okay. I mean, Bulge 81 is fine. Bulge 65 is fine. But the state of the art has moved on. Superior to Bitterwoods. I've never played Bitterwoods, so I can't comment on that. It's supposed to be good. There's certainly a lot of people that like to play it. I prefer Battles for the Ardennes at this scale, despite its age. I think there's reasons for that. Actually, I could drum up reasons why one would prefer Battles for the Ardennes. And Tiny Battles is doing Shattered Union. That is correct. That's a little confusing because Tiny Battles and Flying Pig are pretty much both Mark Walker. And I am not sure if there is a formal relationship there other than they're both Mark Walker. I mean, what's kind of the point other than to have a different imprint, I suppose? So I don't know that this was it, though. I mean, I think they were trying to experiment with different production models, and that's just what they landed on. And it was a small game to do it on, so therefore probably a better target for experimentation. I don't have any visibility on anything more recent that they've done in that series, though. I only have the Hill of Death, which is Champion Hill. Well, that's interesting. William Aarons mentions that Leslie Nielsen, I don't think I knew this, Leslie Nielsen played Frances Marion in the 6-part Walt Disney series in the early 1960s. That's interesting. But remember, Leslie Nielsen started out as a dramatic actor, not as a comedic actor. So, well, yeah, but they do, right. I mean, it seems like there's some bleed between the two. Although the Flying Pig stuff seems to be the sort of bigger, elaborate games like your Old School Tacticals and your Rocket Chickamaugas and stuff like that. So there's that. All right, moving on. The ultimate expression, to some extent, of the Third Reich, the classic rise and decline of the Third Reich from Avalon Hill and designer John Prados, the late John Prados, unfortunately. Yeah, we gotta get these. Well, there's only like 6 more counters anyway. It'd be stupid not to clip them, right? And A Most Fearful Sacrifice is really nice. So like I said, I think that what was going on with Hill of Death is just maybe some experimentation. But again, I don't know. It's Enrico Palazzo. That's the funniest line in the movie, by the way. So, yeah, okay. This makes sense. But what I think of when I see Tiny Battle Publishing, though, are those Ziploc games, actually, and not the boxed games. And, maybe it's just because the boxed games are a little bit more of a current innovation. All right, so what this is so back in the day, John Prados designs Third Reich, and the wargaming world is not the same after that, okay? It is what we would now call a strategic level World War II in Europe game. So that's a classic. It goes through, I believe, 4 editions with Avalon Hill. And there may be a following fan edition or something like that. But eventually, somebody at Avalon Hill decides, we didn't do the Pacific. We could do the Pacific. And since we're doing that, obviously people who are playing this are pretty okay with it being complicated, so we'll make it more complicated. And therefore, we got Advanced Third Reich, along with a companion game, Rising Sun. Was it Empire of the Rising Sun? It might have been. That handled the Pacific as well. I played that back in the day. I was on the Europe map. I think I played the Soviets in Advanced Third Reich, so I didn't get to experience the Pacific firsthand, but there was a certain amount of non-love on the part of the players with the way that the naval and air aspects of the Pacific were handled in Rising Sun. So one of the motivations for then, after Avalon Hill goes away, to kind of redo everything and turn it into what is really kind of a new game, a World at War, but very much still in the tradition of Third Reich and Advanced Third Reich and Rising Sun. And one of the things that a World at War does is kind of more tightly integrate the air and naval into the whole game, so you don't have the sort of weird artifacts that you got in Rising Sun if you played that back in the day, right? And Danny mentions that it was Empire of the Rising Sun. We always just called it Rising Sun. So remember, Leslie Nielsen was in Forbidden Planet too. So one of these days I will do this video, but I need to play more of both games, frankly, before we can do that. The next strategic level World War II game is probably going to hit the table. It's probably Advanced PTO, actually, but we'll see. I kind of really would like to get the European one, so help out with the campaign if you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. It's okay. All right, so World at War, very complicated, a 200-plus page rule book, but just because there's a lot of pages, it's not as complicated as that by itself makes it sound. A lot of that page count is consumed by edge cases that came up at WBC, for example, and that Bruce felt obliged to fix. People will also complain about Bruce making rules changes all the time. There are 2 updates per year to the downloadable electronic version of the rule book. I assume the new printing will have, which there's a new printing coming out anytime, basically. I assume it'll have the new rule book. There haven't been any big changes to those rules for several years, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not going to, I'm not really going to complain about that. All right. I have not looked at Platoon Commander Deluxe. Now, one of the things I will say about World at War and its rule book is it is just not designed to learn the game from that rule. That is not how that rule book is written. So if you tried to take a relatively traditional approach to learning a new war game, where you sit down with the book and read the book and then set it up and push the pieces around and look stuff up, you're probably going to be very challenged to learn this game in that way. It tremendously benefits from somebody to teach it to you. There's 2 reasons for that. One is it is a pretty complicated game overall. I'd put it on a 9 on the GMT 1 to 9 1 to 9 scale. Some folks might disagree with that, but some folks might think it's more than every other game too. I don't know. But again, it's not as complicated as a lot of people would tend to think just based on the size of the rulebook. I know there's a bunch of Napoleonic stuff that they kind of have been dragging their feet on getting it out. Tim Zales, thanks for stopping by. So it's pretty complicated, and the rule book is a quite good, actually, reference rule book. It is not a good teaching rule book. There's also there's not what this really just needs is like a 32-page. Here's how to get started playing a World at War booklet, right? Somebody needs to put that together with plenty of examples and a setup guide and all that stuff. So that's really my only big complaint about a World at War. There's certainly things one could probably argue about in the design itself too. So, I will tell you this: if not everybody will be comfortable doing this, but if you want to watch somebody playing through World at War, Callendale has a whole series on it, and it is worth your time. So, I wouldn't assume that Callendale's getting every rule correct, but, you know, I wouldn't get every rule correct either if I was making the videos. So I can't complain about that. All right, so next up, moving on from A World at War. It is on my to-do list to actually play A World at War, because I haven't played it. I haven't played that game since Advanced Third Reich. So I have it. I'd like to play it. Not getting rid of it. Medieval. This is a card game by Richard Berg in 2003. And it is... we look at... this is kind of one of those build the maps with the cards type of deals. I've honestly never looked at this with any level of seriousness whatsoever. You know, Enrico's a little more animated in these videos than he sometimes is doing other stuff. Let me put it that way. Animated in a very watchable way, I found. In any case, Medieval, Richard Berg's Medieval. Once again, it's a Richard Berg thing. It's a card game. I think these cards are interesting looking, but other than that, I have like no opinion on this at all. So this is probably, it doesn't appear to be like a straight like trick-taking game or suit matching game or anything like that. Last turn lunge for Hungary, according to Marty. And you know what? That reminds me of the inevitable rooting out of the other folks in Australia. So, was it this one? That could be. Yeah, Mark is a big fan of World at War as well. Not a great rating, not a great ranking. Again, it's BGG, so who knows what the people that voted on it think. This is a particularly neatly arranged map out. And again, this was made of the cards. So you, in some way, you play the cards to like expand the map. It looks intriguing, but you know, not intriguing enough for me to run it down. Now, if I'm like at a convention and somebody says, hey, I got Medieval here and I don't have anything else to do. Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll try it. Why not? Worst case is I got another game to add to the wish list. And this is not one that goes for a giant pile of money. So that's even better. All right. Here we have, didn't we cover this already? Ah, okay. So this is we're going to skip this. This is an expansion for the Kasserine game by Vance von Boris that appeared in C3I. We're skipping expansion because I don't have enough time to cover them. What's our time looking like? We're basically barely okay. All right, where's my scotch? There we go. All right, next up is The Rise of the Roman Republic. This is Volume 1 in the Ancient World series. Had Richard Berg done 15 games in this series, I would have bought all of them. This is on the one hand, it's operational ancients, okay? So it's a the specialist of special snowflakes, if you will. This is a combination of topic and scale that we don't see very often. Not never, but not very often. And it's really great that somebody was going to do a whole series of games on this. And there was going to be a game on Alexander and all this other stuff. And none of that ever materialized. Instead, what we got were 2 games. And then Berg, until the end, apparently, was fiddling with game number 3. And I'll get to that in a second. So, I have, all right, I haven't heard anything about this. All right, so Volume 1 of the Ancient World. So it's Operational Ancients. The problem with this particular volume is it's kind of all over the place in a way that Berg kind of liked to do from time to time. To the extent sometimes of including like entire separate games. If you look at Armored Christian Soldiers, for example, which came out, I think, later than this, you'll find that there's like 2 or 3 different games in there. Some of them are multiplayer, some are 2-player. There's like the First Crusade scenario, which like uses a different deck than the rest of it, and it almost feels like a different game. There's some of that in here too. So what we have in here is there's kind of an introductory scenario, which is very early. We have a Second Punic War scenario, but it's like just Hannibal in Italy, so it's not the whole Second Punic War. It's just a little piece of the Second Punic War to kind of tease you about what was going to be going on. And then the main event in this volume is the Samnite Wars. So unless you're interested in that topic, and most people aren't, this might not be an appealing game topically, but the scope of the system was what attracted me to it in the first place. And by the time we got to the second game in the series, Carthage, the First Punic War, yeah, it's not the more interesting of the Punic Wars, but it is at least a Punic War. We could have gotten, games against Pyrrhus of Epirus and all kinds of cool stuff here. I mean, shit, we could have gotten game against Pompey against the pirates. I'd have bought that too. So it's an operational system with sort of a variable number of moves in a given turn for any particular units. With a reasonably elaborate, probably a bit over-chromed, to be honest, but not over-chromed enough that it bothered me, treatment of the Roman political system. And in the second volume, you get a whole thing on the Carthaginian political system, too, which is almost as interesting. So as far as how does this compare to Imperium Romanum, I mean, other than what I just said, they're operational ancients games, to whatever extent Imperium Romanum is operational. The military parts of Imperium Romanum do kind of feel operational, but the other parts of the game feel strategic. I think this is noticeably more playable than Imperium Romanum in any edition that you want to do. Unless I've forgotten about it, which wouldn't be the weirdest thing to happen today. But this is, I mean, they're different in every important respect, right? Imperium Romanum is kind of this magisterial, unique experience of kind of, yeah, you're playing out this particular conflict, which is just a campaign. It's like a whole conflict, like the Civil War between Caesar and Pompey, for example. But you also get that sort of higher level perspective of you got to think about the state of the roads and the cities and the taxation and all this other stuff. You don't have to really deal with that in this, right? It's just it's a straight war game. I mean, I'm not saying that Imperium Romanum is not a war game, but it's got some elements in it that don't directly connect to the military operations. Indirectly, they absolutely do. Rise of the Roman Republic is pretty much a straight war game, and everything that's in there has an effect on the military operations, if that makes any sense. But they're otherwise pretty significantly different. All right, so second volume in this series is Carthage, the First Punic War. The legendary and legendarily unreleased third volume was to have been Thunderbolt, the Second Punic War, which is, again, the one everybody knows about with Hannibal and the elephants and crossing the Alps and all that jazz. Berg passed away without having completing it, so Alan Ray and Mark Herman stepped up and are completing it, or probably, in fact, have completed it for GMT, and we ought to see that very late this year, or more likely, I think, next year. As well. This is a game that third volume is I've been waiting for 21 years. So I have ordered it. I will mention, so the volume 3 is on P500 right now. There are in 2 different versions. You can just get Thunderbolt by itself, or you can get the deluxe edition, which basically contains the components for the first 2 games in the series all in the same box. There would be a lot of overlap otherwise. All you really needed was the rule books. The maps are the same too. So I have ordered that. I got the deluxe edition, even though I have the previous 2 games. So a very interesting series, and I'm not saying it's necessarily for everyone, but then again, neither is Imperium Romanum, right? But really neat game system and series scope. I would love to see some heroic individual take this series and run with it and maybe evolve a little bit and tidy it up and put up more volumes out. I would buy them. So, now, not everybody's going to like everything, right? And it doesn't even necessarily connect to whether it's good or bad or whatever. as Mike is pointing out, and I have pointed out many times, there isn't a lot in the way of operational ancients. There are odds and ends here and there. You have Eagles from GDW, which got turned into Caesar's Legions from Avalon Hill. There are some odds and ends elsewhere. As Mike mentions, the Fate of All that came out, I want to say this year, from Thin Red Line is Greeks versus Persians, but it is also operational ancients. And I don't know if they plan to do this, but I would be delighted if Thin Red Line would turn that into an entire series as well. HUN644 New, thanks for stopping by. And John C. had a buddy who had apparently outstanding taste in the best possible way, because you got the copy. And again, you know, the folks who have complained about this that say there's too much chrome, and that's kind of true. There probably is more chrome than there needs to be. And had this been designed in 2013 or published instead of 2003, I think there's a pretty good chance there would have been a card game to handle a lot of that randomization that is handled by various tables in the existing games in the series. All right, another interesting game that is fondly remembered, and I don't really understand why we're not hearing anything about this ever getting reprinted, is Europe Engulfed. There's a Pacific Engulfed too, or Asia Engulfed, I should say. This is a Jesse Evans and Rick Young. This is one of the game systems that Mark Simonich pointed out as an inspiration for the U.S. Civil War. It is a block game in the Columbia fashion, in that there's info on one side of the blocks. Your opponent can only see the other side. And it is World War II, pretty much on an area map, and it's supposed to be pretty good. And I've looked at this, and it's like, you know, I would like to play this, but I don't even know anybody that owns it. This was also in a big flat, like more traditional board game box, which is, as far as I'm aware, the only thing that GMT has ever done in that box footprint. But the game's supposed to be pretty good. It's got a pretty good rating and a pretty good rank, and whatever that means, right? But it is, you know, there are folks that just don't want to deal with block games, and that's fine. That's just a preference thing. But it, you know, it looks intriguing enough that I probably would have bought it if one could actually get it without paying secondary market prices by the time I got back into wargaming. And if we go and look at the secondary market prices, they are not unreasonable at all, actually, which surprises me. All right, moving on. Corsairs and Hellcats. I think this is a Down in Flames. Yes, this is another Down in Flames installment from Dan Verson. I do like this cover. I'll tell you what, this is true of very few of the games on this list, or indeed out of GMT's entire catalog over their entire existence. When I look at this cover, it does not look familiar to me at all. I could swear that I have never seen this game. Michael Lemick and Dan Verson design. And again, it's a World War II air combat card game. And it's probably fun to play after you come back to the convention. This is, I think, how it works at Consim World in Tempe. You've come back to dinner, you've had perhaps a scotch or a cocktail or two, and you've come back and now you're nursing a beer and you're going to play this war game. I think this could be a tremendously fun experience in that format. So the blocks are expensive, and as I recall, there was a lot of blocks too. So that might be why. But you know what? You reflect that in the price, right? If you just have to rescale your... On the other hand, I may be making it sound trivial, and it isn't necessarily, because GMT might say, hey, it's November of 2024. We're going to put a reprint of Europe Engulfed on P500. And we know that the price of wood is such that this is what the game will cost. And then 3 years later, when they're actually going to send it to the printer, that number might be completely different. So, you know, bear that in mind. And that is the thing that has happened. The price of wood went up. So, you know, what are you going to do? All right, we're close to being done here, folks. Sweden Fights On. This is the second volume in the Musket and Pike series from designer Ben Hall. And this is about 30 Years War stuff. Is this post Gustavus Adolphus? I think it probably is. What battles are in this game? Nordlingen, Wittstock, Second Breitenfeld, and Jankau. Okay, so 1634 to 1645. So once again, 30 Years War stuff. 30 Years War is a really interesting topic. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's always the sheep's fault, by the way. So again, it's a Musket and Pike, so it's tactical game. Again, second half of the 30 Years War, centering around Sweden. I want to say Gustavus Adolphus bites it at first Breitenfeld. Am I wrong about that? I don't think I am. And again, it's in the dual pack. So if you got the dual pack, you're covered here too. I don't know that let me put it this way. They completely redid the counter art and sort of the way the counters are presented in the dual pack. And I hope they be consistent about it. I didn't dislike these. So, you know, I thought they were fine, but somebody, I don't know if it was Ben Hull or we might have asked him that when we had him on the show. That's available on the Chit Show archives. All right, and then finally we have Mike Nagel's Flying Colors. This has itself spawned an entire Age of Sail series with which I believe 4 volumes. I had the original game. And then I got the updated version because it had all the expansion material in it, or at least most of the expansion material, including like the extra scenarios and all that stuff. And then I sent the older one to Dan, who I'm sure has not played it at all. But this is a neat little system. It is, as you could probably tell from this particular photo, it is a bit marker heavy. But it is a squadron level Age of Sail game. So it's, if you think of wooden ships on Iron Man, which is more or less individual ships, beyond 2, maybe 3 ships per player, that becomes a bit of a same thing with, damn it, Close Action. Becomes a bit of a headache to run like a ton of ships. Flying Colors is designed that you'll be able to run a ton of ships. So, at Lutzen. Okay, there you go. Jeff Anderson, thank you. But, you know, despite that, if you're interested in Age of Sail, and I am, and I've read Aubrey Maturin novels, after all, at least a couple of them. At first, I got stuck on the one where Jack Aubrey is on land almost the entire book, and it sucks. But cool system, and I believe there is a new volume on P500 as well. I have the second volume, Serpents of the Seas, which I believe is going to get reprinted. And that is the only thing in the series that I don't have at that point. And I believe that's mostly American Revolution stuff, I think. All right, folks, we are going to clean up a little bit here. We are slightly over, but we were slightly late too. So it is actually okay. I believe it is Post Captain is the one that I really had a hard time with. At the fairly famous Hartville Flea Market, by the way, I found about 7 or 8 Aubrey Maturin books, so I picked them up. So I have a bunch of them now. I don't think I have the first couple, but I'll figure it out. I'll buy the ones I'm missing, if nothing else. The movie is amazing, if you've ever seen Master and Commander. So, all right. So, folks, this has been fantastic. We will be back on tomorrow. And once again, our special guest tomorrow will be Mr. Dana Lombardi. In addition, I feel like I'm lagging. Video might be lagging, in which case it's probably OBS. In any case, let's hope that it's okay, and nobody's complained about it, so I assume that it is okay. Hopefully there'll be more video this week. It just depends on what I can actually get edited. I'm not really spending that much time working on video editing. I got a couple done last weekend or the weekend before, and nothing done this past weekend, so there you go. Tomorrow on the Chit Show, we have Dana Lombardi. Next week on the Chit Show, we have Mr. Alan Emmerich. And then on next week's Counter Clipping Show, we will be going through the splendid Compass Games Christmas holiday, whatever it is, catalog. So stay tuned for that. And I will give you the dirty on all of the Compass stuff whether it's available now or become available at some point. So, folks, it's been fantastic. Everybody have a great rest of the night, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks for coming out.